Have you ever stopped to think about what an animal can teach us about courage and hope? Amidst a pile of garbage, where the sour stench of rotting waste filled the air, a young volunteer discovered something that would change her life forever. It was just another scorching day in Botswana savannah, but what Lyanna, a 24-year-old American, found in that illegal dump wasn't just a dying lion cub, it was a call from destiny. Could you believe that a creature so small and fragile could touch hearts on the other side of the world? Milo's story, the little cub thrown away like trash, will show you that even in the most unlikely places, hope can roar louder than ever. And what happened years later? Well, my friend, that's something that'll send chills down your spine. The African savanna in northern Botswana stretched out like a golden carpet under an endless sky, the dry crunch of leaves under boots echoing like a soft drum. Lyanna, her face sweaty and hair tied back in a messy ponytail, walked with other volunteers, picking up trash from an illegal dump that marred the reserve's beauty. It was grimy work, the acrid smell of burnt plastic stinging her nose, but she felt each filled bag was a step towards saving wildlife. Who would have thought that there, among broken bottles and crushed cans, she'd find a greater purpose? And then, something moved. A faint whimper, nearly drowned out by the buzz of flies, made Lyanna stop. She crouched, pushing aside a torn tarp, and there he was, a lion cub, so tiny he could fit in her arms, covered in filth with his eyes half closed. Her heart raced. Can you imagine someone throwing a living creature into the trash? The worn leather collar with Milo etched on it seemed to scream a story of abandonment. Lyanna felt a pang in her chest, as if the universe was asking, "So, what are you going to do now?" Without a second thought, she scooped up the cub, feeling the faint warmth of his little body against hers. His fur, which should have been soft, was sticky with grime, and his ribs jutted out like the lines of a sad drawing. Lyanna ran to the jeep, ignoring the shouts of questions from other volunteers. The hot savanna wind whipped her face as she held Milo, silently promising he'd have a chance. The cabin at the reserve was simple, smelling of damp wood with the distant sound of hyenas in the night. There, Lyanna cleaned Milo's wounds with boiled water, each scratch telling a story of pain. She wrapped him in old blankets, the rough fabric a stark contrast to his frailty. With a syringe, she dripped warm milk into his trembling mouth, and for a moment, Milo licked, weak but alive. Have you ever seen an animal fight for life like that? That spark of hope ignited something in Lyanna, but the night still held surprises. The next morning, the silence was deafening. Lyanna woke with her heart in her throat, the chilly dawn air prickling her skin. Milo wasn't moving. Panic hit her like a punch. Had all her efforts been for nothing? She bundled the cub and raced to the jeep, tires screeching on the red dirt as she drove 60 kilometers to the Wildlife Recovery Center. The jeep jolted along the rutted trail, kicking up clouds of dust that danced in the blazing sun. Lyanna held Milo close, his tiny chest barely rising and falling, the only sign he was still alive. The smell of dry earth filled her nose, mingling with the fear gripping her heart. Have you ever felt that desperation to save something, unsure if time's on your side? She floored the gas, tires screaming against the dirt, whispering to Milo, "Hang on, little one." At the recovery center, the veterinary team sprang into action, the sound of slamming doors and urgent voices echoing in the concrete room. Lyanna handed Milo over, her eyes welling up as she watched him disappear onto a makeshift stretcher. He was covered in wounds, purple bruises marking his skin, his ribs so visible they seemed drawn on. A vet, face grim, muttered about severe malnutrition and infection. Lyanna stood outside, the warm savanna wind blowing against her sweaty skin. While she waited, she learned more about Milo. His collar hinted at a cruel story, raised illegally as a pet, likely by exotic animal traffickers, and dumped when he became useless. What kind of person does that to a living creature? Anger bubbled in her chest, but the distant beep of a heart monitor snapped her back. Milo was being stabilized, shots for infection, fluids for dehydration. A thread of hope appeared, but the night would be critical. Lyanna didn't budge. She slept outside on a hard chair, the hum of crickets and the scent of eucalyptus calming her slightly. In the morning, a vet called out, "He's awake." Lyanna rushed inside, heart pounding, and saw Milo trying to lift his head, his amber eyes glinting faintly but alive. She laughed, half crying, "Can you believe the strength of this little cub?" If you love stories of resilience like this, hit that like button and subscribe, so you don't miss a single one. Lyanna spent hours by his side, cleaning wounds with the sharp smell of antiseptic in the air, talking to him as if he understood every word. And somehow, it felt like he did. Who hasn't felt like an animal can read your soul? The recovery center smelled of disinfectant and wet grass, with the muffled whir of ceiling fans overhead. Milo, now in a padded enclosure, received fluids through a thin tube, his small body looking even more fragile under the white lights. Lyanna, eyes puffy from a sleepless night, watched every move the vets made, her heart swinging between relief and fear. Have you ever felt hope so fragile it's like a spider web, yet strong enough to hold everything together? The team learned more about Milo's dark past. His collar was a clue to a cruel scheme, lion cubs raised for tourist selfies, then discarded when they grew too big. Lyanna's stomach churned at the thought, who does that to such a majestic animal? Authorities were called, and an investigation into exotic animal trafficking began to take shape. Meanwhile, Milo got antibiotics, the rhythmic drip of the four filling the air. Lyanna, sitting by his side, felt each drop was a promise of a second chance. Days turned into weeks, and Lyanna never left Milo's side. She slept on a cot by the clinic, the smell of cold coffee mingling with the damp morning air. When she finally got to visit Milo, he raised his head, amber eyes meeting hers, and let out a faint purr, almost like a hi. Can you believe the power of a bond like that? She started helping with his care, learning to mix milk formulas and monitor wounds. Each day brought a small miracle. Milo gained weight, his wounds healed, and he even tried to play, swatting at a rope toy. The center's director, impressed by Lyanna's dedication, made an offer that changed everything. "Stay," he said, offering training in wildlife medicine. Lyanna felt a warmth in her chest, as if the universe was pointing her to a new path. She accepted, trading sleep for studies and care for Milo. The savannah seemed to sing as Milo recovered. The sound of his paws hitting the sandy enclosure echoed like a drum of hope, while the scent of fresh grass lingered after a light rain. Lyanna, now with a notebook full of wildlife medicine notes, watched Milo chase a rope ball, his ears twitching with each clumsy leap. Have you ever seen an animal reborn like that, as if the world gave it a second chance? He was no longer the frail cub from the dump, his amber eyes shone with a strength that seemed to say, "I am a lion." She spent her days at the center, learning to care for other animals while Milo stole the show. The cub, now with glossy fur, played with other rescued lion cubs, rolling in the red dirt that clung to his budding mane. Lyanna smiled, but felt a pang. Their human-animal bond was so strong it hurt to think of letting go. At night, with the sound of crickets filling the silence, she wondered, will he forget me when he's free? The center's director noticed Lyanna's dedication. One afternoon, under a setting sun that painted the sky orange, he called her over. "You have a gift," he said, offering a permanent role as a caregiver. Lyanna felt a chill in her stomach, as if the savannah was whispering, "This is your place." She accepted, trading her old life for a routine of muddy boots and nights studying by the dim light of a lantern. Milo, meanwhile, grew strong, learning to hunt with toys that mimicked prey. Milo and Lyanna built a unique bond. When she entered the enclosure, he'd run, rubbing his head against her legs, his low purr rumbling like a little engine. The smell of warm fur and the heat of his skin made Lyanna laugh, even when exhausted. Who hasn't felt that an animal understands more than words can say? But the center had a clear goal: reintroduce Milo to the wild. Lyanna knew that love sometimes means letting go. The African savannah seemed to pulse with new energy, the horizon shimmering with heat rising from the earth. At the recovery center, the sound of children's laughter mixed with the distant roar of lions as volunteers unloaded donation boxes. It all started with a photo of Milo, now a young lion with a scruffy mane, playing in the enclosure. Posted on social media, the image went viral, shared thousands of times with the caption of a cub rescued from a dump. Have you ever seen how a small story can spark a fire in strangers' hearts? The news of Milo and Lyanna spread worldwide, and the impact was beyond anyone's imagination. messages flooded in. Kids sent hand-drawn letters with scribbled lion cubs and wobbly words saying, "Save Milo." Donations poured in from as far as London and Tokyo, funding medicine, new fences, and even a well for clean water. The smell of fresh paint hung in the air as the center gained a new wing, named Milo's Haven. Lyanna read the messages at night, under the yellowish glow of a lantern, feeling a warmth in her chest, as if Milo's love was crossing continents. The viral story brought more than money. Volunteers started showing up, with worn backpacks and eyes shining with eagerness to help. A group of local students launched a campaign against animal trafficking, inspired by Milo's cruel past. The dust kicked up by the new helpers' boots seemed to carry a promise of change. Lyanna, now an experienced caregiver, spoke at schools, sharing how a cub tossed in the trash became a symbol of hope. Who would have thought a lion cub could teach so much about activism? Milo, now strong, ran with other young lions in a protected area, the sound of his paws hitting the earth echoing like a hymn to life. He learned to hunt, chasing targets with a determination that made Lyanna smile, even with a heavy heart. Releasing him into the savannah would be the ultimate act of love, but also the hardest. Sometimes, she'd catch herself watching him, his fur gleaming in the sun, thinking, "Will he remember me?" Under Botswana's starry sky, where the savannah's silence is broken only by the chirp of crickets, Milo now runs free, his mane swaying like a crown. Lyanna, hands calloused from so much care, still works at the reserve, guided by a purpose she found in that dump. Their story proves that sometimes the greatest teachers have four paws and a heart that never gives up. Have you ever thought about what a single act of compassion can spark? From a cub tossed in the trash to a symbol of redemption, Milo showed that love, when given genuinely, can echo across continents. Today, Milo lives in a protected area, learning to be the king he was always meant to be. Lyanna, transformed by him, dedicates her life to conservation, proving heroism is born in the unlikeliest places. This story reminds us that empathy, courage, and care can change not just one life, but the world. So, have you ever had an animal that changed your life? Share it with us in the comments. If this story warmed your heart, the next video YouTube suggests will move you even more. Don't miss it.